Hey everyone, Sassy Mouse here, and today I would like to wish you a happy 420. Today I want to talk a little bit about, well, this holiday, but specifically I want to talk about some strategies you can take towards enjoying 420 in the safest, most harm reduction-y way possible. Now, I do want to preface by acknowledging that despite what DARE or whatever anti-drug program you went through in school told you, marijuana is, in the grand scheme of things, much safer than most other drugs. Now, there is an R on the end of that because obviously any activity you do in life has some level of risk. Sleeping has a level of risk depending on what's going on, right? So no drug use is entirely safe, and I do want to start with that. But marijuana is certainly not going to do some of the ridiculous things that I remember being told it would do in elementary school. Things like causing you to lose all your brain cells and giving you cancer and making you just be a heroin addict. There are other factors that can lead to some of those things, and some of that stuff is pretty close to being straight up bullshit. Let's start by talking about how people typically celebrate 420. Most people, if you do use cannabis, will use this as an opportunity to maybe smoke a little bit more than they typically do, maybe eat an edible, something along those lines. But it's important to remember that the majority of people in the world do not use cannabis. So for most people, this is just another day in April. For those who are choosing to use cannabis, it can be important to be aware of what the laws in your local area are. If you live there full time, you probably are at least somewhat aware of this if this is something you do, but it can be a helpful reminder that cannabis is not legal in all places. If you live somewhere where it is legal for adults, it is of course important to remember whether you are above the age of being able to legally purchase it in your area. Where I live, that is 21. So if you are under the age of 21, such as being a freshman in college at 18 or 19 or 20, or even being in high school, 16, 17, 18, something along those lines, you may still be breaking the law by celebrating this holiday. Now, that's not to say that you're doing anything wrong if you are under the age of legal cannabis use in your area, or if cannabis use is completely against the law. There is an argument to be made either way. But it is important to remember that there can be legal consequences for consuming cannabis if you are not legally able to in your area. So the first and most important piece of harm reduction is A, being aware of what those rules are, and B, being conscientious of when and where and how you're using to prevent yourself from having unexpected legal consequences for celebrating a day that, you know, is really only a holiday for people who like weed. If you live in a place where the laws are particularly strict, it might be worth considering whether the potential ramifications are actually worth it. Now, I know that's kind of an extreme thing to say for a lot of people, but you have to take your future and your safety into consideration if you live somewhere where the laws haven't caught up to the science. The next thing I want to talk about is how people consume their cannabis. Most people like to smoke cannabis, which is cool, awesome. There is potentially some risk from smoking, particularly if you have something like asthma or lung problems. If you had COVID in the last couple years, your experience of cannabis may be different because your lung function may not be back to 100% yet. And hopefully it does get back there if you are experiencing that. I am truly sorry if that's something you're going through. With that said, there are a lot of ways to use cannabis. If you do have lung problems in one way or another, it might be worth looking into other options. For most people, smoking cannabis has some benefits though. It is very easy to titrate your dose, to only use as much as you would like to get as high as you would like. It also can wear off a lot faster than some other methods. You get to be back to normal if you need to in about a 3 to 6 hour window, depending on how sensitive your body is to it. So smoking does have some benefits, but you have to weigh those against the potential risks given your body and your health. One of the other really common ways to consume cannabis is to eat it. Eating an edible has some other potential risks to it. Although it is much easier on your lungs, one of the biggest problems with edibles is that once you have swallowed, you are committed to however much cannabinoids are in your system at that time. You may not even know that you have taken too much because oral drugs in general, but oral cannabis in this case, does take about 30 minutes to an hour to start affecting you. So you might take an edible, think, oh man, I'm not feeling that high at 15 minutes, and eat some more, ended up doing too much. And some people might be like, oh, there isn't a too much. Oh, yes, there is. I have been there and it was not fun. And for some people, that may be an honest statement. You might not have ever experienced too much for yourself, but some people are more sensitive than others. Doing too much can make you feel overwhelmed, anxious, nauseous even. It can make you feel disconnected from time and place and reality. It can have almost a dissociative or hallucinogenic effect on some people at certain doses. So, it is very important to go slow with edibles. Do not jump in, because especially if you didn't make it yourself and you haven't consumed this particular edible before, it might be quite a bit stronger than you intended. Now, I mentioned I did too much at one point. That brings us to my next point, which is don't feel pressured by the people you're around to use more than you intended to. I am not saying that I was peer pressured into using cannabis, but I will say because of the environment I was in, which at the time was a protest for marijuana rights, I ended up consuming much more than I normally would. This led to me being disoriented, nauseous, out of it, while walking around Seattle, which is not where I actually live. Thus, it is really important if you're hanging out with other people to know your limits and be able to say, you know what, I'm done for now. If your friend wants to eat a whole brownie and smoke a whole blunt bowl full of weed, that's on them. That's their body, they know their limits. If you are a casual user, you smoke maybe a joint or less per day, or you never really use edibles, you might be like, you know what, instead of having a whole brownie, I'm going to start with an eighth or even a quarter. This can give you a chance to kind of see how your body reacts and add on as you would like. But don't feel like you have to keep up with your peers because they don't know how your body reacts. And I'm not saying they don't have your best interests at heart, but they may not know how to react if you start to have a bad time. Unfortunately, our abstinence, drugs, drug war culture thing has led to people being egregiously undertrained on how to handle difficult drug experiences. It has made people incredibly undertrained on how to be respectful of your friend's consent to or not to use drugs. It leads to people using too much, having a bad time, and having their friends be kinda, fish out of water on how to help them. They end up being like, oh, it can't be that bad, or, oh, you should just chill out. And that's not going to help anyone. If you do have a friend who has used way too much, the best thing to do is just to stay calm, be like, hey, it's alright, it's just a substance, it will wear off at a certain point, what can I do to help you? For most people, the best thing you can do is just to sit calmly, to not freak out, to not push them to do anything. Most people, when they get to that point, they need a stable, calm environment. Don't be like, oh man, I want to go for a walk in the park. They probably can't handle leaving the room you're in right now. If you do end up having a difficult time because you consume too much, remember that it is a drug. It will wear off. If you took an edible, it will take a little bit longer than if you smoked it, but eventually it will come down. And if you can do something like lay down, pull up your favorite show, watch it for a little bit, and just try to relax, it will go away. Arrowhead has a note on their website that most cannabis is not in fact dosed with PCP. It is most drugs are kind of expensive and people don't want to add them to things they're not going to make money on, although that statement is becoming less and less true with more and more people adding fentanyl to everything under the sun for no fucking reason, so that's fun. But in general, most weed is going to be weed. If you do have a product of unknown origin, start with a little bit. Give yourself a good 15, 30, 60 minutes to see how it affects you and then go from there. The last thing you want to do is use too much or have unexpected effects that ruin your holiday. The most important thing to remember is that if you are a healthy, adultish person, you are likely to get through any experience that you have. It is a substance. It is something that your body will process and excrete.
Editing Sassy Mouse here, and I do want to point out though that if someone is having a very extreme reaction to whatever they've taken, it might still be worth it to call 911 even if what they took was supposed to be cannabis. With the state of our drug market, it's not worth playing around with you or your friends' lives. If someone is not breathing or is reacting in a way that is quite extreme, it may very well be time to call 911, and especially if someone's not breathing. If someone has done something stupid like put fentanyl or something like that on your cannabis, which I'm not saying is a likely thing but might happen just because everything's fucking crazy right now, please, please, please call 911. Do not put that off. It's not worth it.
Obviously, the goal of 420 is to have a good time, and I do hope that you have that if you are celebrating. The point is to have a relaxed, fun experience. It's to remember how far we have come, and if you live somewhere that, isn't as progressive, to remember that there is still a fight to be fought. It's a time to watch stupid stoner movies and hang out with your friends if they like to use weed too. So in the end, remember, it doesn't have to be a holiday where you try to get as smashed as possible. It can be a holiday where you smoke a single joint, hang out on the couch, and watch a stupid stoner movie with your friends. With all that said, I hope you have a happy 420 if you are celebrating. If you're not, this April, Easter, or something, I don't know if you celebrate that, happy Egg Day. And if neither of those things apply to you, happy April. I hope you have a good one. Take care. Remember that although many drugs are not as dangerous as school might have taught us they were, they're also not just the safest things in the world. They're still a substance, and they still can have effects that we didn't intend for them to have. Take care out there. Have fun. Be considerate of your friends. Happy 420.